Hello everyone, Danny Roddy of DannyRoddy.com. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you for liking, subscribing, commenting. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much. I have an amazing viewership, and that's all because of you guys, so thank you for making that possible. Today I want to talk about aspirin, or the Swiss Army knife of male pattern baldness remedies. And before we get too deep into it, I wanted to say I have a 2013 book that you can download for free on my website or purchase for a few dollars off Amazon. I have a 2-hour series based on these ideas on this YouTube channel. I have an Instagram, I have a Twitter, and I talk with people on Patreon. All that to say there's more resources if you are interested in exploring these ideas. And like a lot of the basic questions have probably been answered many, many, many times. Also, none of the ideas in this video are original to me. I take zero credit for anything said here. I think Ray Peat obviously is the inspiration for all the material on this channel, you know, and you should check out him as a primary resource. His article, Aspirin, Brain and Cancer, Calcium and Disease, Hypertension, Organ Calcification, and Shock versus Respiratory Energy, and When Energy Fails, Edema, Hypertension, Heart failure, sarcopenia, cramps, etc. And to prime this episode, his quote, "If a newly discovered substance had aspirin's anti-infective, anti-cancer, anti-stress, antioxidant, and anti-inflammatory actions, it would be the most researched substance in history." And a huge thank you to Nicholas Simpson for forwarding me this paper, which I would not have seen. And Nicholas Simpson is jacked. He's incredibly intelligent, and he's an amazing individual. So sincere appreciation to Nick for sending me this paper. And so finally onto the paper. And this video is a little bit of a sequel to the video I made 3 months ago, where I was speculating about the connection between hair and brain health. And so I threw out a lot of ideas in that video, but this paper is really the first step that, at least that I've seen, that is really moving things in that direction. And so that's why I'm so appreciative to Nick for forwarding it to me. And so this paper is called Relationship Between Androgenic Alopecia and White Matter Hyperintensities in Apparently Healthy Subjects. And white matter hyperintensities are like the visual brain atrophy in the white matter of a person that tend to occur in aging. It's like a white tissue injury or demyelinization of the axons or lesions in the brain, and they show up on the MRI in a certain way, and that's why they have this name. But the paper says a healthy brain is essential for living a longer and fuller life. White matter hyperintensities in the brain may reflect brain aging. With normal aging, there is a decline in the total volume of white matter at a rate of approximately 10% each decade. Frequency of abnormal white matter hyperintensities was significantly higher in patients with male pattern baldness compared to those without male pattern baldness, and hypertension and the male pattern baldness were independent determinants of abnormal white matter hyperintensities, and male pattern baldness may be regarded as a surrogate marker of asymptomatic white matter hyperintensities, which is related to arteriosclerosis and vascular risk factors that has a significant impact on people's lives. And so how do these white matter hyperintensities develop? I think we can cover a lot of ground by cementing this amazing quote from Mr. Ray Peat, which simplifies a hugely complex biochemical web of hormones and signaling substances. And so Ray says estrogen, hyperventilation, lactate, increase serotonin, and I think it's serotonin that directly increases parathyroid hormone, and then parathyroid hormone increases nitric oxide. So as I'm talking for the next few minutes, you want to think about this quote because it makes things a lot simpler. So estrogen, among the other like the hormones and signaling substances from the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, those liberate free fatty acids, and this can cause insulin resistance and then later arterial stiffness and hypertension. And AGAC in 2014 said, "We conclude that male pattern baldness might be an indicator of arterial stiffness in asymptomatic young adults. As a second matter, insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome may explain the link between arterial stiffness and male pattern baldness. Finally, the association between arterial stiffness and male pattern baldness could be established through hypertension. It is well known that arterial stiffness may precede and predict future development of hypertension." And of course, when you're not oxidizing glucose to carbon dioxide and you're shunting it prematurely into lactic acid, this sets up a situation where you're becoming essentially deficient in carbon dioxide and you can't use oxygen efficiently. And so that sets up a state of pseudo-hypoxia. And this apparently is the state of the formation of the brain lesions or the white matter hyperintensities, among other things like inflammation and things. But carbon dioxide is an important vasodilator of the cerebral blood vessels. This paper by Cipolo, the cerebral circulation, and I won't bore you guys with all that, but the carbon dioxide is necessary for just the delivery of oxygen and nutrients and sugar and things to the brain. So it can be devastating when you're not oxidizing glucose to carbon dioxide, and that should be just a focal point of any kind of health situation of investigating that. And so when you're not producing enough carbon dioxide, you tend to increase the production or the liberation of serotonin, I think, from platelets and things like mast cells. And apparently, people that take SSRIs might have more white matter hyperintensities. And then serotonin increases parathyroid hormone. And in 2014, parathyroid hormone was associated with increasing white matter hyperintensities, reflecting increased burden of cerebral small vessel disease. And like serotonin, parathyroid hormone decreases oxidative metabolism. And parathyroid hormone causes an inappropriate amount of calcium to move into cells, and that turns on nitric oxide, basically like choking out or killing the cell. And parathyroid hormone, this is another reference I stole from Ray, but he pointed to a Facebook post where a parathyroid hormone surgeon said that the longer they have hyperparathyroidism, the more hair they lose. And so you have 4 parathyroid glands on the back of your thyroid, and they can produce lots of hormone when a person is vitamin D deficient, when they have low thyroid function, when they're not consuming enough calcium, sodium, potassium, or magnesium. So all that to get to the actual point of the video, talking about aspirin. So aspirin might help reverse white matter hyperintensities. It has a general protective effect against brain aging. It's incredibly cheap, we'll get to that a little bit later, but aspirin opposes like every bad thing in that Ray's painting of the stress response that tends to get more intense as you get older. So that estrogen, hyperventilation, lactate, etc. So aspirin opposes estrogen. I'm sure it does it multiple ways, but the one way I can think of is that the PUFA, or the polyunsaturated fatty acids, linoleic acid can be converted into arachidonic acid in the liver. And then arachidonic acid is like substrate for prostaglandin synthesis. And then prostaglandin E2 is a type of prostaglandin that can convert testosterone to estrogen. And then as well, I always mention it, but the prostaglandin D2 is found to be elevated in the balding scalps of men. And so aspirin opposing the production of prostaglandins is a good thing, I think. Aspirin opposes hyperventilation by increasing carbon dioxide and increasing the oxidation of glucose to carbon dioxide, decreasing the formation of lactic acid. Aspirin apparently opposes serotonin by decreasing its release from the platelets. And so most of the serotonin in the body is produced from the intestine, and then it's carried around in the platelets. And then aspirin appears to oppose its release. So it's an anti-serotonin drug, essentially. And then aspirin appears to lower parathyroid hormone, nitric oxide, cortisol, and aldosterone. And parathyroid hormone increases aldosterone, and is a primary, not controversial player in hypertension. So I think a person should really arm themselves with knowledge about anything they're going to put into their bodies. And so I know that you're not going to find lots of people like espousing the benefits of aspirin. So I think it's good to be dutiful and read about things before you use them. And I'm not trying to frame aspirin like a finasteride. I'm not saying, take aspirin and then all is good and you don't have to worry about anything. I think it's part of a multi-layered strategy of reducing stress, inflammation, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like one of the things a person can use to help mitigate the barrage of multiple stresses that we're under every day. And so things like a high calcium, magnesium, sodium diet, that would be part of it. Progesterone, vitamin D, thyroid, DHEA, things like coffee even. And that is in line with this Jane et al. Paper in 2014, where they say it's unlikely that a single targeted agent will be sufficient for treating male pattern baldness, and therefore it would be a challenge to obtain compounds with multiple activities. And so a few caveats with aspirin: one, it needs to be taken with vitamin K, and so it knocks out the clotting system, and vitamin K can restore your clotting factors in your liver, the protein S and protein C. And two, I think it's a good idea to use it with food, and so taking it like after a meal. And then three, I think it should probably be dissolved too. And so you take a glass of water, put the aspirin tablets in it, put a little baking soda in it, wait till the fizz stops and it's all dissolved. And then there'll be a bunch of junk at the bottom of the glass. And then you pour it into another glass, leaving the junk in one glass. And then you can mix that aspirin water with Coke or juice or whatever you want. So I have time, so I do that. But the few times I've taken the pills, it's kind of irritated my stomach. So whenever I can do that, I try to. Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have a bi-weekly live stream with Georgie Dinkov and friends, and so you should definitely subscribe to get that in your feed. It's been a blast and really fun so far, so I'm really enjoying that. And please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and that motivates me to make more of them. I sincerely appreciate it. And I tried to answer all the comments as long as they're not just like statements. Thank you guys so much. Sincerely appreciate it. I have an amazing viewership. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.